The rain had been falling all afternoon, steady and cold, turning the sidewalks into shallow rivers and the gutters into rushing streams. In a quiet neighborhood on the edge of the city, where the houses were big, the lawns were always green, and the driveways held cars that cost more than most people made in a year, a little girl stood shivering on the front porch of the biggest house on the street. She couldn't have been more than 10 years old. Her sneakers were soaked through, her jeans muddy at the knees, and her thin jacket did nothing to keep out the damp chill. She clutched a crumpled piece of paper in one hand and a hospital bracelet in the other, its plastic edge digging into her palm. Her eyes were red, not just from the rain but from crying so hard and so long that her throat felt raw and her chest ached with every breath. She'd walked for over an hour to get here. She didn't have a phone. She didn't have bus fare. All she had was a name she'd heard her mom whisper once during a late-night phone call years ago, when things were a little better. Mr. Reeves. And an address scribbled on the back of an old receipt, tucked into the bottom of her mom's jewelry box, the one with the fake pearls and the broken clasp. She'd found it that morning, after the social worker left. After they told her they might have to take her to a group home if no family member could take her in. After she'd sat alone in the hospital waiting room for 6 hours, watching nurses rush past with serious faces, none of them stopping to tell her anything about her mom. So she ran. Not away, but toward the only lead she had. Now standing on this wide stone porch with its potted ferns and motion sensor lights, she felt smaller than ever. The house loomed above her like something out of a movie. Tall windows, smooth gray stone, a heavy oak door with a brass knocker shaped like a lion's head. It looked like the kind of place where people didn't knock unless they were expected, and she was definitely not expected, but she had no other choice. She raised her hand and knocked. Once, then again, harder, her knuckles stinging against the cold wood. She waited. Nothing. Rain dripped off the roof and landed on her shoulder. She knocked a third time, her breath coming fast now, panic rising like a tide in her chest. Just as she was about to turn away, defeated, the door opened. A man stood there. He was tall, dressed in a crisp white shirt with the sleeves rolled up, holding a steaming mug in one hand. His hair was neatly combed, his face clean-shaven, and his eyes, sharp and tired, narrowed slightly when he saw her. For a second, neither of them spoke. The man looked down at the drenched child on his doorstep, like he was trying to figure out if this was some kind of prank, or maybe a dream he hadn't woken up from yet. Then the girl opened her mouth, and what came out wasn't a full sentence, but a whisper so broken it barely held together. "They hurt my mom. She's dying, and I don't know what to do." The words hung in the air between them, heavy and real. The man froze. His mug tilted slightly, hot liquid sloshing over the rim and onto his hand, but he didn't seem to notice. His eyes, just a moment ago guarded and distant, softened with something like shock, then something deeper, recognition. He didn't know her, not by name, but he knew that look, the wide, terrified eyes, the trembling chin, the way her small body seemed to be holding itself together by sheer will. He'd seen that look before. Not on a child, but on a woman who used to clean his office late at night years ago, when his company was still small and he slept on a couch in the break room more nights than not. She'd always been quiet, always polite, always stayed a little longer than she had to, straightening his papers, wiping down his desk, even refilling his coffee when he forgot to. He'd thanked her once, offered her a bonus, but she'd just smiled and said, "Just doing my job, sir." He never learned much about her life, only that she had a daughter, and that she worked 2 jobs to keep them afloat. He hadn't thought about her in years, not since the office moved downtown, not since his life exploded into board meetings, private jets, and charity galas. But now, standing in front of him was that daughter, soaked, scared, and utterly alone. "Come in," he said, stepping aside before he even realized he'd made the decision. The girl hesitated, glancing back at the rain, then up at him with eyes full of doubt. "Are you Mr. Reeves?" He nodded slowly. "Yes, I am." She took a shaky breath and stepped inside. The warmth of the house hit her like a blanket. The floor was smooth wood. The air smelled like lemon polish and coffee, and soft light glowed from lamps in every corner. It was nothing like her apartment, The one with the flickering hallway light, the thin walls, and the fridge that hummed too loud at night. This place felt safe, or at least it felt like it could be. Mr. Reeves closed the door behind her, shutting out the storm. He set his mug down on a side table and crouched slightly so he was closer to her eye level. "What's your name?" he asked gently. "Maya," she whispered. "Maya," he repeated as if testing the sound of it. "Okay, Maya, tell me what happened," and so she did. In halting sentences, with tears slipping down her cheeks again, she told him how her mom never came home from her night shift at the diner. How a neighbor called the hospital and found out she'd been hit by a car near the bus stop. How the doctor said she had a brain injury and might not wake up. How the bills were already piling up, and the social worker said they couldn't keep her at the hospital much longer without a guardian. "I don't have any family," she said, her voice cracking. "My grandma passed last year. And my dad, he's not around." She looked down at her wet shoes, ashamed, like it was her fault. "I tried calling everyone I could think of, but no one answered except I remembered my mom once said you were kind, that you always left a light on in your office for her when she worked late." Mr. Reeves went very still. He hadn't remembered that. But hearing it now, it felt true. He had left the light on, not because he thought about it, but because he'd noticed once that she looked nervous walking through the dark parking lot alone. So he started leaving the overhead on. Just a small thing, something he'd forgotten completely, but she hadn't. Now, that small thing had led her here, to his door, in the middle of a storm, with nowhere else to go. He stood up slowly and walked to a closet near the entryway. He pulled out a thick towel and handed it to her. "Dry off," he said. "You're going to catch a cold." She took the towel and wrapped it around her shoulders, the soft fabric warm against her skin. She watched him as he paced the room, running a hand through his hair, his mind clearly racing. Finally, he stopped and turned to her. "Maya, I'm going to help you. I don't know exactly how yet, but I promise, I won't let you go through this alone." She looked up at him, eyes wide with something like hope, but also fear. "Why?" she asked quietly. "You don't even know me." He knelt again, meeting her gaze. "Because your mom helped me once, even if I didn't realize it at the time. And because no child should have to knock on a stranger's door in the rain and say the words you just said." Outside, the rain kept falling. But inside, for the first time in days, Maya felt like she could breathe. Mr. Reeves picked up his phone. "First things first," he said, dialing a number. "We're going to the hospital. Right now." And just like that, the life he'd built, carefully controlled, perfectly ordered, insulated from the messy realities of the world outside, began to shift, not with a bang, but with a knock. A small, desperate knock from a girl who had nothing left but courage and a memory of kindness. He grabbed his keys from the counter, tossed a coat over his shoulders, and held out a hand. "Come on," he said. "Let's go see your mom." Maya hesitated for only a second before taking his hand. It was warm, strong, and for the first time since the accident, she didn't feel entirely alone. The drive to the hospital was quiet, but not the kind of quiet that felt empty. It was the kind that comes when two people are thinking hard about something serious, and words just don't seem big enough to hold everything they're feeling. Rain still tapped against the windshield, the wipers swishing back and forth like a metronome keeping time for their thoughts. The man, Mr. Reeves, drove carefully, one hand on the wheel, the other resting on his knee. Every so often, he'd glance in the rearview mirror at the girl in the back seat. She sat curled up in the oversized coat he'd given her, the towel still draped over her shoulders, staring out the window at the blur of wet streets and passing lights. She looked so small. Too small to be carrying this much weight, he remembered now. Not everything, but enough. The woman, Maya's mom, had worked for his company in its early days, back when the office was just a rented space above a laundromat, and he was surviving on instant noodles and hope. She came in every night after her day job, cleaned the floors, wiped down desks, emptied trash bins, always on time, always quiet, always respectful. He'd never asked her name back then, not until one night when he stayed late working on a pitch that could make or break the business. She'd knocked softly on his open door and asked if he wanted coffee. He said yes, surprised she was still there. She brought him a cup, black, just how he liked it, and said, "You're going to burn yourself out if you don't rest." "Sir?" He laughed it off, but the next morning, he found a note on his desk. "Sleep is part of the plan, too. He kept that note for years, taped it inside his laptop case, forgot about it when he upgraded to a new one. Now here was her daughter sitting in his car, scared and soaked, because the world hadn't been kind to her mother, and no one had stepped in to help. When they reached the hospital, the automatic doors slid open with a soft hiss. The lobby was dimly lit, the usual bustle of daytime replaced by a hushed calm. A few people sat in plastic chairs, eyes tired, faces drawn. The smell of antiseptic and stale coffee hung in the air. Maya clung to his sleeve as they walked to the front desk. The nurse looked up, her expression neutral until she saw Maya's wet clothes and red eyes. "Can I help you?" she asked gently. "I'm here to see Elena Rivera," Mr. Reeves said. "She was brought in after a hit and run. I'm with her daughter." The nurse's eyes softened. She typed something into her computer. "Room 312, third floor. But visiting hours are almost over. We'll be quick," he said, already moving toward the elevators. Upstairs, the hallway was quieter. Fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead. Room 312 was at the end. The door was slightly ajar. Mr. Reeves pushed it open slowly. The room was small. A single bed, machines beeping in steady rhythm, tubes running from an IV pole to a woman lying still beneath thin white sheets. Her face was pale, bruised near the temple. Her dark hair fanned out on the pillow. She looked fragile, like a bird with a broken wing. Maya let out a tiny sound, half sob, half gasp, and ran to the bedside. She grabbed her mom's hand, careful not to disturb the IV line. "Mom," she whispered. "It's me." "I'm here." No response. Just the quiet hum of the machines. Mr. Reeves stood near the door, feeling like an intruder in a moment too private for strangers. But Maya turned to him, tears streaming down her face. "She hasn't opened her eyes since they brought her in," the doctor said. "Said her brain is swelling. They don't know if she'll wake up." He swallowed hard, walked over slowly, looked down at the woman who'd once cleaned his office, who'd made him coffee when he was too tired to stand, who'd left notes about sleep like she cared whether he lived or burned out. "I'm so sorry," he said, voice low. Maya nodded, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "They said we can't stay here long. Social services came today. They said if no one takes me in, I have to go to a group home, but I can't leave her. What if she wakes up and I'm not here?" Her voice cracked on the last word, and Mr. Reeves felt something inside him break open, something he didn't even know was closed. He pulled out his phone and stepped into the hallway. Dialed his assistant, even though it was nearly midnight. "Lisa," he said when she answered, voice groggy. "I need you to do something for me. Right now." He gave her instructions. "Contact the hospital billing department. Clear all outstanding charges for Elena Rivera. Authorize full payment from his personal account. Then call the best neurologist in the state, someone he'd met at a charity event last year, and ask if they'd consult on a case no matter the cost." Lisa didn't ask why. She just said, "Consider it done." Back in the room, Maya was still holding her mom's hand, talking softly, telling her about school, about the neighbor's cat that liked to sit on their fire escape, about how she'd finished the book they were reading together. Mr. Reeves sat in the chair by the window. Watched them, listened, and for the first time in years he didn't think about profits or stock prices or the next big deal. He thought about how easy it was to forget people when you moved up in the world, how success could build walls without you even noticing. Later, a doctor came in, middle-aged, kind eyes, white coat slightly wrinkled. He introduced himself and explained Elena's condition in simple terms. The impact had caused bleeding in the brain. They'd done surgery to relieve pressure, but recovery was uncertain. "She's strong," he said. "That helps, but she'll need constant care if she wakes up. And someone to advocate for her." Mr. Reeves met his gaze. "I'll be that someone." The doctor nodded, not questioning it. Maybe he'd seen enough hardship to recognize genuine intent when he saw it. After the doctor left, Maya looked at Mr. Reeves with wide, searching eyes. "You don't have to do this," she said quietly. "You barely know us." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I knew your mom longer than I realized, and I should have done more back then. I can't change the past, but I can do something now." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "I'm going to make sure you don't go to a group home. I'm going to make sure your mom gets the best care possible. And I'm going to be here every step of the way until she's back on her feet." Maya didn't say thank you. She just nodded, and in that nod was a trust so deep it made his chest ache. They stayed until the night nurse gently reminded them that visiting hours were over. As they walked back to the car, Maya held his hand again, this time without hesitation. On the drive home, she fell asleep in the back seat, head against the window, the coat pulled up to her chin. Mr. Reeves drove slowly, watching her in the mirror. He thought about his own childhood, growing up in a cramped apartment, his mother working double shifts, never having enough. He'd sworn he'd never go back to that life, and he hadn't. But somewhere along the way, he'd stopped looking back at the people still living it. Now, fate, or maybe just a little girl's courage, had pulled him back. When they got to his house, he carried Maya inside like she weighed nothing. She stirred slightly but didn't wake. He laid her on the couch, covered her with a soft blanket, and turned off all the lights except one small lamp in the corner. He sat in the armchair across from her, sipping cold coffee from a mug he'd forgotten about, staring at the rain still falling outside. His phone buzzed. A text from Lisa. Billing cleared. Dr. Chen will visit first thing tomorrow. He typed back, "Thank you." Then he looked at Maya, sleeping peacefully for the first time in days, and whispered almost to himself, "I've got you both now." And for the first time in a long time, he meant it. Not as a CEO, not as a millionaire, but as a human being who finally remembered what mattered most. The next morning came with soft light and the smell of coffee. Mr. Reeves had barely slept. He'd stayed up most of the night making calls, rearranging meetings, and quietly moving mountains so that one woman, lying unconscious in a hospital bed, wouldn't be forgotten by a system that often looked the other way. Maya woke up on the couch, blinking against the morning sun filtering through the blinds. For a second she looked confused, like she'd forgotten where she was. Then her eyes landed on Mr. Reeves sitting at the kitchen table with a laptop open, papers spread out, phone tucked between his ear and shoulder. "Good morning," he said gently, ending the call. "How'd you sleep?" She sat up slowly, pulling the blanket tighter. "Better than I have in a while," she admitted, voice still rough from sleep. He smiled, a real one this time, not the polite kind he used in boardrooms. "I made pancakes. Not great ones, but they're edible." She padded into the kitchen in her socks, eyeing the slightly lopsided stack on a plate. She took one, added a little syrup, and took a small bite. "They're good," she said, and this time, she smiled too. It was a small moment. Quiet. Ordinary. But it felt like the first real breath either of them had taken in days. After breakfast, Mr. Reeves explained the plan. A specialist, Dr. Chen, was coming to the hospital that afternoon to evaluate Elena's condition. He'd also arranged for a private room, better nursing care, and therapy consultations. And for Maya, he'd spoken with a school counselor who agreed to hold her spot until things settled. "But where will I stay?" she asked, stirring her orange juice with a spoon. "You'll stay here," he said simply, "at least for now. There's a guest room upstairs. It's got books, a desk, even a window seat. You can make it yours." She looked down, fiddling with the hem of her borrowed shirt. "Won't people say things about you taking in some random kid?" He leaned back in his chair. "Let them talk. What matters is that you're safe and your mom knows you're being taken care of if she wakes up." Later that day, they returned to the hospital. Dr. Chen was already there, a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and a calm voice. She spent nearly an hour examining Elena, reviewing scans and talking with the nurses. When she stepped out into the hallway, Mr. Reeves and Maya waited anxiously. "She's stable," Dr. Chen said. "That's the good news. Her brain is healing slowly, but there's still swelling. We need to keep monitoring her closely. And if she wakes up, recovery will take months, maybe longer. She'll need physical therapy, speech therapy, maybe even help relearning basic tasks." Mr. Reeves didn't flinch. Whatever she needs, she'll have it. Dr. Chen studied him for a long moment. Most people wouldn't go this far for someone they barely know. "I owe her more than I realized," he said quietly. Back in the room, Maya sat by her mom's bedside again, reading aloud from a book they used to share, Charlotte's Web. Her voice was soft but steady. Mr. Reeves stood near the window, watching the way her small hands turned the pages, how she paused sometimes to squeeze her mom's fingers, as if trying to send strength through touch alone. Over the next few days, something shifted, not just in the hospital room, but in the rhythm of their lives. Mr. Reeves canceled 2 international trips, moved meetings to early mornings or late nights so he could be at the hospital by 4 p.m. every day. He brought Maya homework from her school, helped her with math problems at the kitchen table, and even let her pick the movie on Friday night. She chose an old animated film about a lost dog finding its way home. He didn't admit it, but he cried a little during the ending. Reporters started showing up. Someone had seen him carrying groceries into the hospital, or maybe a nurse mentioned his name. Soon headlines popped up online. Tech CEO steps in for injured cleaner's family. At first, he ignored them, but when a camera crew showed up at his gate, he called his publicist. "Don't issue a statement," he said. "Don't do interviews. And if anyone asks, tell them this isn't a story. It's just what's right." His board of directors wasn't thrilled. In a tense video call, one investor said, "This is bad optics. People will think you're doing it for publicity." Mr. Reeves leaned into the camera. "Then let them think that. I'm doing it because a little girl knocked on my door with nowhere else to go. If that hurts our stock price, so be it." Silence followed. Then, surprisingly, the oldest board member, a man in his 70s, cleared his throat and said, "My daughter used to clean offices too. Before she got sick. I wish someone had done for her what you're doing now." After that, the complaints stopped. Meanwhile, Maya started to relax. She stopped flinching when the phone rang. She laughed once, really laughed, when Mr. Reeves tried to braid her hair and ended up with a lopsided mess. She even started leaving her shoes by the door instead of hiding them under the couch, like she belonged. One evening, as they sat eating takeout on the living room floor, he'd burned the pasta again. Maya asked, "Why are you really doing this? You could have just paid the bills and walked away." He set his fork down, thought for a long time, "Because I spent years building a life where I didn't have to see people struggle. I thought that was success. But seeing you on my doorstep, it reminded me that real success isn't about what you have. It's about who you help when you can." She nodded slowly, like she understood more than her years should allow. The next morning, something unexpected happened. Elena's fingers twitched. Just once, but Maya saw it. She gasped and called the nurse. Within minutes, doctors were in the room, checking vitals, adjusting monitors. Nothing dramatic, no sudden awakening, but it was a sign. A tiny spark in the dark. Mr. Reeves stood in the doorway, heart pounding. He didn't say anything. He just watched Maya press her forehead to her mom's hand and whisper, "I'm still here. Mama, I'm right here." That night, back at the house, Maya asked if she could sleep in the guest room with the door open. He said yes. As he passed her room later to turn down the hall light, he saw her sitting on the windowsill, hugging her knees, staring at the stars. He almost walked away. But then she spoke without turning. "Do you think she'll remember me?" He stepped inside, leaning against the doorframe. "I think she'll never forget you." Not for a second. She looked at him then, eyes glistening. "Thank you for not turning me away." He didn't say "you're welcome." Instead, he walked over and sat beside her on the wide sill. They sat in silence for a while, watching the night sky. Two people from different worlds, bound now by something deeper than money or status. And in that quiet moment, with the city humming far below and the stars burning steady above, it didn't feel like charity. It felt like family. Not the kind you're born into, but the kind you choose, one act of kindness at a time. 3 weeks had passed since that rainy night, and the world had settled into a new kind of rhythm. The hospital room no longer felt cold or foreign. It smelled like the lavender lotion Maya rubbed on her mom's hands every morning, like the peppermint tea Mr. Reeves brought in a thermos, like hope, quiet but stubborn. Then on a Tuesday morning just after sunrise, it happened. Maya was sitting by the bed, reading aloud from a notebook filled with things she'd written for her mom, little stories about school, the neighbor's new puppy, how the maple tree outside their old apartment had started blooming. She paused to adjust the blanket, and that's when she saw it. Her mom's eyelids fluttered. At first, Maya thought she'd imagined it. She held her breath, waited. Then slowly, like a flower opening to the sun, Elena's eyes opened. Not all the way. Just enough to show the dark brown irises Maya knew better than her own reflection. "Mom," Maya whispered, voice cracking. Elena didn't speak, but her gaze moved. It found Maya's face, and in that look, foggy with medicine but unmistakably aware, was recognition. Love. Relief. Tears spilled down Maya's cheeks. She pressed the call button with shaking fingers. Nurses came running. Doctors followed. Machines beeped faster. But through it all, Maya never let go of her mom's hand. Mr. Reeves arrived an hour later, still in his coat, having driven straight from a morning meeting. He stood in the doorway, watching as Elena, weak but awake, reached up with trembling fingers to touch Maya's cheek. The sight hit him like a punch to the chest. He stepped back quietly, giving them space, and waited in the hallway with his hands in his pockets, blinking hard. Later, when things calmed down, a nurse invited him in. Elena was exhausted but alert. Her voice was a whisper but clear. "Thank you," she said when she saw him, "for taking care of my girl." He shook his head. "She took care of me too." Over the next few days, Elena grew stronger. She could sit up for short periods. She could sip broth. She could say Maya's name without slurring. But as she regained her mind, she also began to remember the night of the accident and the truth behind it. One afternoon, while Maya was napping in the chair beside her, Elena asked Mr. Reeves to sit closer. Her voice was low, urgent. "The car, it didn't just hit me and drive off by accident," she said. "I saw the license plate. I told the police, but nothing happened. A week later, the officer who took my statement said the case was closed due to lack of evidence." Mr. Reeves frowned. "Did you know the driver?" She hesitated. "Not personally, but I recognized the car. It belonged to the son of Councilman Briggs. He's been in the news a lot, fundraisers, city projects. His son's been in trouble before, speeding, underage drinking, but nothing ever sticks." Mr. Reeves went very still. He knew that name. Councilman Briggs had been pushing for tax breaks for big developers, including Mr. Reeves's own company. They'd met at events, shaken hands, smiled for photos. Now it all made sense. Why the case vanished, why no one followed up, why a working mother could be left to die in the street while the person responsible walked free. He didn't say anything right away, but that night back at the house he sat at his desk long after Maya had gone to bed. He pulled up news articles, public records, police reports. He called a lawyer he trusted, not a corporate one, but someone who handled civil rights cases, someone who didn't care about political connections. "I want the hit and run reopened," he said, "and I want every piece of evidence preserved. If the original investigation was buried, we'll dig it back up." The lawyer agreed. "It won't be easy. Briggs has influence, but if we can prove negligence or worse, a cover-up, we might get justice." Mr. Reeves didn't care about might. He cared about should. And it should never have come to this. Meanwhile, Elena's recovery continued. Physical therapists came daily. She struggled to walk at first, gripping the parallel bars like her life depended on it. But she never complained. She'd look at Maya watching from the corner, and she'd push harder. One day, Mr. Reeves brought her a tablet so she could video call Maya when he drove the girl back to the house for schoolwork or rest. Elena used it to watch Maya do her homework, to hear her laugh, to remind herself why she was fighting. But the real turning point came during a quiet conversation in the hospital garden. A small patch of grass and benches, the staff, called the healing spot. Elena sat in a wheelchair, wrapped in a blanket, sunlight warming her face. Mr. Reeves sat across from her, holding 2 cups of tea. "I keep thinking," she said softly, "about all the people like me. The ones who work 2 jobs, who can't afford insurance, who get hurt and just disappear. If you hadn't answered that door, Maya would have been lost. I might have died alone." He looked down at his cup. "I should have done more long before that night." She reached out and touched his arm. "You're doing it now, and that matters." Then she said something that changed everything. "If I get better, if I get my life back, I want to help others like me. Not just with money, with real support. A place they can go when the system fails them." He looked at her, really looked, saw not just a victim but a fighter, a leader. And in that moment an idea began to form. Over the next week they talked more about what that kind of help could look like. Emergency housing for families in crisis, legal aid for workplace injuries, childcare for single parents recovering from illness, a network of support, not just a handout. Mr. Reeves started sketching plans on napkins, then on his laptop. He called people, not investors, but social workers, nurses, community organizers. He listened more than he spoke. At the same time, the legal team made progress. They found the original police report, buried in a digital archive. They tracked down a security camera from a gas station 2 blocks away that had captured the car speeding away. And they located a witness, a night shift bus driver, who'd seen the whole thing but was never interviewed. When the new evidence was presented, the district attorney had no choice. The case was reopened, news spread fast. Councilman Briggs held a press conference, calling the accusations baseless and politically motivated. But the video footage didn't lie. The license plate was clear, and the driver, his son, was identified. Public outrage grew. Protests formed outside City Hall. People shared Elena's story online, not as a tragedy but as a symbol of how the powerful protect their own while the rest are left behind. Through it all, Mr. Reeves stayed out of the spotlight. He let Elena decide how much she wanted to share. When a reporter asked him for a comment, he simply said, "This isn't about me. It's about doing what's right." Back at the house, Maya helped her mom practice walking up the stairs step by slow step. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching fireflies blink in the dusk, Elena turned to Mr. Reeves. "You've given us everything," she said, "but I don't want to just take. I want to build something that lasts," he smiled. "Then let's build it together." And so in the quiet of that summer evening, with crickets singing and the scent of jasmine in the air, they began planning something bigger than any of them had imagined, a center for people who fall through the cracks. A place where no one has to knock on a stranger's door in the rain and whisper, "I don't know what to do," because from now on, someone would be waiting, 1 year after that rainy night. The sun shone bright and warm over the city. The air smelled like fresh-cut grass and blooming magnolias. In a newly built space on the edge of downtown, where an old laundromat once stood, a small crowd gathered under a white canopy. Balloons bobbed in the breeze. Kids ran between tables with juice boxes. A string quartet played softly in the corner. This was the grand opening of the Elena Rivera Worker Support Center. Elena stood at the front, not in a hospital gown or worn-out slippers, but in a simple blue dress. Her hair neatly braided, her steps steady. She held a pair of crutches, but she didn't lean on them much anymore. Her eyes, once clouded with pain and fear, now sparkled with quiet pride. Beside her, Maya held a bouquet of sunflowers, bouncing slightly on her toes with excitement, and just a few feet away, Mr. Reeves watched them both, hands in his pockets, wearing a plain button-down shirt instead of a suit. He hadn't wanted to speak at the ceremony. He'd insisted the spotlight belonged to Elena, but when she turned and caught his eye, she smiled and waved him over. He walked up slowly, and the small crowd, made up of nurses, janitors, delivery drivers, teachers, and neighbors, clapped softly. Not because he was rich, but because they'd seen what he'd done when no one was watching. Elena took the microphone from the small podium. Her voice was clear, stronger than anyone expected. "A year ago," she began, "I was lying in a hospital bed, not sure if I'd ever walk again. My daughter was scared, alone, and knocking on doors, hoping someone would care enough to answer." She paused, glancing at Maya, who beamed back. But one person did answer. And because of that one act of kindness, we didn't just survive, we got a second chance. And today, this center isn't just for us. It's for every person who works hard but still falls through the cracks. For every parent who's missed a rent payment because of a medical bill. For every kid who's gone to bed hungry while their mom works the night shift. She stepped back and gestured to the building behind her. A bright, welcoming space with large windows. A community kitchen, counseling rooms, and a small medical clinic. Here you'll find help without judgment. A warm meal, legal advice, a place to rest while you get back on your feet. Because no one should have to face crisis alone. Then she turned to Mr. Reeves and handed him the mic. He shook his head at first, but Maya nudged him gently. "Go on," she whispered. "You helped build this." He took a breath. "I didn't build this," he said into the mic, his voice rough with emotion. "Elena did. And all the people who showed up when it mattered. I just finally learned to listen." The crowd clapped again, louder this time. After the speeches, people wandered through the center. Some signed up for services. Others just sat at the tables sipping lemonade, talking like old friends. Maya handed out cupcakes she'd helped bake the night before, carefully placing one on a plate for Mr. Reeves. Later, as the sun began to dip low in the sky, the three of them sat together on a bench near the garden out back. The noise of the celebration faded into a gentle hum. Maya reached into her backpack and pulled out a small handmade card. She handed it to Mr. Reeves without a word. He opened it. Inside, in careful handwriting, it read, "You saved us when no one else looked. Thank you for seeing us." At the bottom, she'd drawn 3 stick figures holding hands, one tall, 2 smaller, with a sun shining above them. He looked up, eyes glistening. "I didn't save you," he said softly. "You saved me." Maya tilted her head. "How?" "Because before you knocked on my door, I'd forgotten what really matters," he said. "I thought success was about numbers on a screen, about how much you own. But you showed me it's about how much you give, and who you're willing to stand beside when the world turns away." Elena reached over and squeezed his hand. "You didn't have to do any of this, but you chose to. And that choice changed everything," he nodded. He'd sold 2 of his luxury cars, redirected a chunk of his personal wealth into the foundation, stepped back from day-to-day operations at his company to focus on this new mission. His board had been shocked at first, but even they'd come around when they saw the impact. Now his days weren't filled with endless meetings or investor calls. They were filled with walking through this center, listening to people's stories, helping find solutions. He'd never felt more useful. As twilight settled in, Maya leaned her head on his shoulder. "Do you think we'll always be like this?" she asked. "Like what?" he asked. "Like family." He looked at Elena, then back at Maya. "Family isn't just about blood," he said. "It's about who shows up, who stays, who loves you even when it's hard." Elena smiled. "Then yes, we're family." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching fireflies blink on and off in the gathering dark. Somewhere inside the center, someone laughed. A child squealed with joy. The sound of real life, messy, hopeful, beautiful, filled the air. Later that night, after everyone had gone home, Mr. Reeves stayed behind to lock up. He walked through each room one last time. The kitchen with its spotless counters, the counseling office with its soft chairs, the small library filled with donated books. In the hallway, a framed photo hung near the entrance, a picture taken just a week ago of the 3 of them, standing together in front of the unfinished building, tools in hand, smiling like they'd already won. He turned off the lights, stepped outside, and locked the door. The street was quiet now, peaceful. As he walked to his car, he thought about that night a year ago, the rain, the knock, the small voice saying, "She's dying." He'd opened the door expecting a delivery, a neighbor, maybe a lost dog. Instead, he'd opened the door to a new life. Not a perfect one. There were still hard days. Elena still had therapy. Maya still had nightmares sometimes. And the fight for justice wasn't over. Councilman Briggs's son had been charged, but the legal battle dragged on. Yet through it all, they had each other. And they had this place. A living reminder that kindness can grow into something that helps more than just one person. He got into his car, started the engine, and drove home. Not to a mansion full of empty rooms, but to a house that now echoed with laughter, homework arguments, and the smell of burnt pancakes on Sunday mornings. Because sometimes, the most powerful thing a person can do isn't to build a company or make a fortune. It's to answer the door. And when you do, you might just find the family you never knew you were missing.